Hello, everyone. This is your time to disconnect from the outside world and join me on a journey through this emotional story. So, relax, focus on the sound of my voice, and let the story envelop you, taking you away from all the stresses of the day. The morning sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden light through the dusty windows of John Avery's small kitchen. As he sat at the old wooden table, nursing a cup of tea, his hands trembled slightly, not just from age, but from the worries that weighed heavily on his mind. John's life had never been one of luxury. He wore his poverty like a well-fitting suit, one that had seen better days but still held its shape. The locals knew him as the quiet widower who tended his own garden and fixed his own leaks, a man who asked for little and offered help often. His children, however, saw him through a different lens. To them, he was a relic of a bygone era, a father who had seemingly failed to grasp the opportunities of modern life and was now paying the price in his solitude and sickness. Today, John's thoughts lingered on his children. He remembered the days when the house echoed with laughter, when the backyard was a blur of motion as his kids played until the sun dipped below the horizon. Those memories seemed like fragments of another life, one that had faded into the background, replaced by the reality of his children's dismissive attitudes and rare, almost obligatory visits. As he sipped his tea, the phone rang, shattering the morning calm. It was Michael, his eldest, who spoke with that familiar tone of hurried concern that parents often hear from children who have too much on their plate. "Dad, how are you feeling today? Look, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we looked into some better care options for you." John's heart ached at the suggestion. He knew Michael meant well, but the unspoken words hung heavily between them. It wasn't just about care, it was about worth, about the uncomfortable reminder of his financial and physical state that his children could barely stand to witness. "I'm managing, son," John replied, masking the pain that each day brought him. "Let's not rush things. I have my ways here, and the roses are just beginning to bloom." After the call, John turned his attention back to his modest surroundings, his gaze lingering on the photograph of his late wife, Sarah. She had always believed in him, believed in the decisions he made, including the choice to keep his wealth a secret, a decision that now seemed like a burden he bore alone. Outside, the garden called to him. He pushed himself up from the chair, each movement a testament to the years he had weathered. As he stepped outside, the fresh air greeted him like an old friend. Amidst the roses, he found a temporary refuge, a place where he could think about how to bridge the growing gap between him and his children, how to reveal the truth without losing them in the process. In the solitude of his garden, John Avery was a millionaire lost in thought, a father torn between revelation and fear, holding on to a secret that was both his shield and his shackles. John Avery's illness crept upon him like a thief in the night, its symptoms at first so mild and unassuming that he paid them little heed. But as weeks turned into months, the illness brazenly took hold, sapping his strength and clouding his days with fatigue. John, ever the stoic, refused to let on how gravely he felt, masking his pain with a smile whenever his children called, which was seldom, and even rarer still in person. On a particularly biting winter morning, John woke to a piercing pain in his chest. It was sharp, unrelenting, and unlike anything he had experienced before. For a moment, he lay in his narrow bed, gazing through the frost-laced window, contemplating the quiet dignity of facing his fate alone. But the thought of his children, distant though they might be in both miles and affection, spurred him to act. With a trembling hand, he dialed his phone, but the line remained silent. His children were too busy to answer. Reluctantly, he dialed the emergency services, and soon, a wailing ambulance broke the serene silence of his quaint neighborhood. At the hospital, doctors buzzed around him, their faces etched with concern as they administered tests and whispered gravely about his condition. John, caught in a haze of pain and medication, could barely focus on their words, but he understood enough. His heart was failing, and time, it seemed, was slipping through his fingers like the last grains of sand in an hourglass. Lying in the stark white hospital room, John's thoughts drifted to his children. He remembered their laughter echoing through the halls of their childhood home, the warmth of their embraces, the brightness of their smiles. How had those fond memories faded into the coldness of neglect? He longed to bridge the gap, to share his love and his truth, but doubt clouded his heart. Would they care to listen, or had the lure of the city stripped them of the values he had tried so hard to instill? As night deepened, casting long shadows across his room, John felt the weight of his solitude more acutely than ever. It wasn't the wealth he had hidden away that he wished to disclose, it was his legacy of love and resilience he yearned to pass on. Perhaps, he thought wistfully, the end might bring them back to his side. Maybe, in those final moments, they would see beyond the facade of his simple life and understand the depth of his affection, and the pain of being so achingly alone. In the dim glow of the morning, John Avery sat alone at his old, oak kitchen table, the myriad of medication bottles spread before him like a grim mosaic. He picked up each bottle, his hands trembling slightly, a physical echo of a deeper, internal struggle. With each pill he swallowed, he wondered about his children, about what legacy he was leaving behind in their hearts, beyond the material world. The house was silent, save for the occasional creaks and groans that come with age, much like his own body. He often thought of calling Michael, Emma, and little Sarah to come visit, to see him, really see him, not as the frail old man they joked about but as their father who loved them fiercely despite their estrangement. But pride, or perhaps fear of rejection, held him back each time. John remembered the days when they were young, their laughter filling the house, their small hands in his as he taught them how to plant seeds in the garden, telling them, "It's not the fruits you see today but those you nurture and grow that bring the greatest joy." How distant those memories seemed now, lost to the years and the city that had claimed them. Today, though, was different. Today, he felt a pressing urgency, a whisper of time slipping through his fingers like the fine sand he used to walk upon with them at the beach. John picked up the phone, his heart thumping in his chest, and dialed Michael's number. The line clicked, and then rang, a beacon calling out across the void that had grown between them. "Michael," John's voice was firmer than he felt, "I need to see you. All of you. Please come home." There was a pause, a breath held in suspension across the miles. "Dad? Is everything okay?" Michael's voice, laced with a confusion that hinted at concern, was a balm to John's weary heart. "Just come, son. Please. There are things we need to talk about, things I should have said long ago." John's words felt like stones lifted from his chest, each one a confession of his longing to reconnect. As he hung up, a small, hopeful smile tugged at the corners of his weary face. Maybe it wasn't too late after all to mend the frayed edges of their family tapestry. Maybe, just maybe, this last lesson would be the one that would stick, the lesson that wealth was not the coins clinking in one's pocket but the love shared, the memories made, and the legacy of values passed down through generations. As Michael rummaged through the dusty drawers of his father's ancient desk, a faint light from the setting sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, something, anything that could help him understand the man his father really was. The leather of the chair creaked under his weight, echoing in the silence of the old house, a sound that seemed too loud in the stillness. His hands, guided more by a son's desperation than by a clear purpose, found a hidden compartment at the back of the drawer. It was stuck, but with a firm tug, it gave way, revealing a stack of meticulously organized papers. As he pulled them out, his eye caught a glimpse of numbers that made his heart skip a beat, figures too large for his mind to immediately comprehend. Bank statements, property deeds, stock portfolios, all meticulously documented and all pointing to a truth that seemed impossible. His father, the man who wore patches on his trousers and repaired his own shoes, had been a billionaire. Not just wealthy, but fabulously so. Michael's hands trembled as he sifted through more papers, each document unraveling the myth of the humble man he thought he knew. A wave of shame washed over him as he remembered all the times they had mocked their father's frugal ways. They had laughed, not knowing that each economical choice was not out of necessity, but a testament to a man's principles and discipline. It was then that Michael found a letter, addressed to him and his siblings, written in their father's firm hand. "My dear children," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am no longer able to share with you in words the reasons behind my choices. I have lived a life rich in experiences but measured in expenditure, not out of need, but out of a desire to teach you that the value of a man is not in his wealth, but in his character." Tears blurred Michael's vision as he read on, his father's voice almost audible in his mind, speaking of love, of sacrifice, and of a hope for his children to one day understand the joy of a life not measured by material success but by the love shared and given freely. John had planned for them, not just financially, but emotionally and morally. He hoped to leave behind children who valued hard work, who understood the worth of a dollar, and who knew the importance of giving back. The letter detailed his wishes for them to use the wealth not for personal gain but as a tool for making a difference. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the room darkened, but a new light seemed to ignite within Michael. He knew what he had to do. He would share the discovery with his siblings, not just the fortune they had unknowingly inherited but the father they had never truly known. The wealth would change their lives, but John's hopes and dreams for them would reshape their souls. That evening, as Michael left the old house, he wasn't just carrying documents of untold wealth but a heavy, bittersweet burden of understanding and regret, tempered by a budding hope. A hope to become the person his father had always intended him to be. In the dimly lit room, where only the soft beep of the hospital monitor punctuated the silence, John Avery looked up at his children gathered around his bed, a sight more precious than any treasure he had accumulated. "I always hoped this day would come, not for my sake, but for yours," he began, his voice a frail whisper that drew his children closer. Michael, the eldest, struggled with the weight of regret. He had prioritized wealth and status over family, and now, faced with his father's frailty and wisdom, he felt the shallowness of his past ambitions. Beside him, Anna, who had always hidden her insecurities behind designer clothes and an affluent lifestyle, wiped away a tear, realizing that the father she had often dismissed had been her most significant supporter in ways she had never appreciated. The youngest, Eric, stood slightly apart, his mind racing through memories of his father's quiet dignity in uncomplaining ways. He remembered the small acts of love, a repaired toy here, a bedtime story there, all from a man they had underestimated and ridiculed. John continued, each word laced with the warmth and forgiveness that defined him. "My dear children, I never wanted to change you, only to show you that life could be rich with or without money. The wealth I accumulated was never for extravagance but for security, for peace of mind, and most importantly, for opportunities, not just for me, but for you." The room was thick with emotion as each sibling faced their reflections in their father's tired but forgiving eyes. "Dad, we were blind," Michael admitted, his voice choked. "We saw the world through lenses tinted by wealth and forgot the values you tried to teach us." Anna moved closer, taking her father's hand. "I'm sorry for every missed birthday, every unreturned call. I thought I was finding myself in the city, but I lost myself instead." Eric, too, stepped forward, a decisive nod affirming his new understanding. "Let's make it right," he suggested, looking at his siblings. Let's be the family Dad always wanted. It's not too late for us. John's smile was weak but satisfied as he watched the resolve form among his children. He had waited for this moment, holding on to life with a tenacity fueled by hope that before he departed, he could see his children embrace the values he held dear. As they stood together, a newfound respect binding them, they realized that the wealth John Avery had amassed wasn't measured in the dollars he left behind, but in the lessons he imparted, which would now shape the rest of their lives. As the leaves began their vibrant dance to the ground, signaling the arrival of fall, the Avery siblings faced the realization that their time with their father might be drawing to a close. This autumn was unlike any other. It was quieter, the days seemed shorter, and the nights longer and filled with reflection. Sarah, the youngest, found herself sitting by her father's side on a particularly crisp morning, holding his frail hand in hers. The room was silent except for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall, a reminder of the passing time they could never reclaim. John's breaths were shallow but steady, a testament to the life still fighting within him. In these quiet moments, Sarah recounted stories from her childhood, her voice barely above a whisper, not just to comfort her father but perhaps to imprint these memories in her own heart forever. Michael, once the most distant of the three, now took diligent notes as his father spoke in his rare lucid moments, imparting wisdom about life and love. John's words were weak but weighted with decades of experience and unshared knowledge. Wealth, he told Michael, is not just in your bank account. It's in every kind deed you perform, every hand you hold in times of need, and every smile you share. Michael, whose life had once orbited around increasing his financial portfolio, felt a shift within him, a realignment of his priorities. Elizabeth, who had always been the pragmatic one, organized her father's documents and affairs, but the task took on new meaning now. As she sorted through the papers, she discovered letters John had written to each of them on various birthdays, never sent, filled with love and hopes for their futures. Each letter was a bittersweet revelation of her father's quiet involvement in their lives, his love a constant presence even in his absence. One evening, as the sun set in a spectacular display of oranges and pinks, John motioned for his children to come closer. With a strength that seemed to gather from some unseen reservoir, he spoke of his dreams for them, not of wealth or success, but of happiness and true contentment. Remember, he said, his voice steady, to live a life full of love and compassion. For that is the richest life you can lead. Tears filled their eyes as they promised to live by his words, to honor the life he had lived and the lessons he had taught. In those last few days, the Avery home was filled not with the sounds of sorrow but with love, laughter, and the sharing of old stories, a tapestry of memories woven with threads of newfound understanding and respect. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had lived simply, loved deeply, and given them an inheritance far greater than money. As the golden leaves of autumn fell softly outside the Avery family home, the world inside was marked by a profound silence that followed John Avery's passing. The stillness was not just a mourning of his death, but a deep reflection on his life, a life whose true depth had only recently been revealed to his children. Now, as they gathered in the old living room, surrounded by the simple furnishings that had characterized their father's humble lifestyle, a new reality began to set in. Elaine, the youngest, broke the silence. "I can't believe we never knew. All those times we worried about him." Her voice trailed off, choked by emotion. Michael, always the pragmatic one, looked through the window, watching a lone leaf twirl in the wind, a mirror to his spiraling thoughts. "He taught us without teaching, didn't he? Living out every lesson he wanted us to learn." Sarah, the middle child and the one who had drifted furthest from John's ideals, wiped away a tear. "He lived like he was poor, but in truth, he was richer than any of us will ever be." She wasn't just speaking of money. the richness of John's character had slowly dawned on them all. He had built a fortune not for himself, but as a testament to the values he hoped to pass down: humility, charity, and love. In the days that followed, the Avery siblings took to sorting through John's belongings. Each item, no matter how worn or outdated, told a story of sacrifice and wisdom. In the pocket of an old coat, Michael found a receipt for a large donation to a local homeless shelter. In a drawer, Elaine discovered a stack of letters John had written to various charities, offering support and resources. These discoveries painted a picture of a man who lived by every principle he valued. The funeral was a quiet affair, attended by many whose lives John had touched, people from all walks of life who spoke not just of his wealth, but of his immense generosity and kindness. "Your father helped us when no one else would," said a woman who had once benefited from John's secret philanthropy. "He was a man who saw wealth as a duty, not a privilege." This outpouring of stories from the community sparked a change in the Avery siblings. They realized that their inheritance was not meant to elevate them above others, but to give them the means to lift others up. Motivated by their father's legacy, they established the John Avery Foundation, focusing on combating poverty and inequality, a tribute to a man who had mastered the art of true wealth. Through their actions, John's children finally understood his life's work: wealth was not to be hoarded, but harnessed for good. In the end, John Avery left behind a fortune far greater than money. He left a legacy of changed lives, including those of his own children. In the hushed light of dawn, Sarah Avery stood outside the newly inaugurated community center bearing her late father's name. She traced the letters of the John Avery Foundation with a gentle finger, each stroke a vivid reminder of the man who had taught her the true essence of wealth. As the sun crept higher, casting long shadows over the freshly planted gardens, Sarah reflected on the profound transformation her family had undergone since their father's passing. Gone were the days of extravagant spending and careless disregard for the deeper values of life. In their place, a sense of purpose and dedication had grown, rooted in the lessons John had left behind. The foundation had become their channel to mend the neglect they once showed not only to their father but to the community that had silently watched their rise and fall. Today, the center was hosting its first major event, a job fair aimed at supporting locals in finding employment and training opportunities. The crowd gathered was a testament to John's belief in second chances and community support, values he held dear but had only managed to instill in his children in his final days. As people started to fill the center, Michael, the eldest, took to the stage. His voice broke slightly as he began to speak. "Today, we are not just opening a center, we are fulfilling a promise. A promise to a man who believed in the potential of every person he met, who believed that true wealth was not counted in money, but in how we help each other rise." Tears shimmered in the eyes of many who listened, moved by the sincerity and change of heart of the Avery siblings. Down below, Emily mingled among the attendees, handing out brochures and sharing her own story of transformation. "My father used to say, 'Give and you shall receive much more than you have ever given.' I never understood that until I saw how much he had given us through his love and patience." The event was more than a success, it was a testament to John's enduring influence. As the day drew to a close, the siblings gathered to watch the sunset from the same garden their father once tended alone. The community center buzzed with the energy of new beginnings and renewed hope, a living legacy of a man who was a billionaire not by the size of his bank account, but by the immensity of his heart. In their hearts, the Avery children knew that the true measure of their father's wealth lay in the seeds of compassion he planted, now blossoming into a haven for those seeking support and a new start. John Avery's legacy was not in the money he left behind, but in the lives he changed, including those of his own children.